Welcome back. I'm Roy Gerstenberger of First Person Services, and this is DeLovely, a production featuring conversations with people who are creative, curious, and committed to creating whole communities where inclusion and diversity is celebrated. I am so excited to introduce you to our guest today.
My name is Lawrence Seiler. I'm an advocate. My wife Arlene Seiler and I host and produce a television show here at ORCA Media called Abled and On Air. Mm-hmm. And it's a program for people with special needs and their families.
We'll get back to Lawrence in a minute, but I want to say, I have to admit, I didn't know much about public education and government access TV before I met Lawrence. So the term public educational and governmental access was officially adopted by the federal government in its Cable Communications Act of 1984, and that allowed local cable franchising authorities to require cable operators to set aside one or more of their cable channels to non-commercial, non-profit local programming, and also to house and equip and fund these operations. Public educational and government access, or PEG access, was a public benefit that could be required of the cable operator in addition to or in lieu of the local franchise fee. That's in exchange for its monopoly-like cabling of a community to sell its commercial products via the public rights of way. So the key word here is that it could require. So the local authorities could require the cable operators to provide the access, but the cable operator was not automatically required to do so. So here in Vermont, there are 25 community media operations. Most of them are independent nonprofit organizations. And I met Lawrence at the ORCA Media Center, which is the Onion River Community Access Program, and we had a great conversation. Listen in. And when did Abled and On Air come into being?
Well, Abled and On Air, let me give you a little bit about my background.
Please.
For 25 years, 25 plus years, I was I'm originally from New York, originally from Bronx, New York. Mm-hmm. I had started out as a news reporter for a public access station called BronxNet Television, BronxNet Community Access Television, at Lehman College in the Bronx. I was getting my degree in journalism there. And a gentleman by the name of J.J. Gonzalez from Channel 2 News, he was a retired news director from Channel 2, and he came to Lehman College to teach. And he said to me, "What do you want to do for the rest of your life?" I said, "I want to be a news reporter. Come down to the TV station," because BronxNet was right there at Lehman. Lehman College is part of the City University of New York system. And the rest is history. But I started doing a show called, producing a show called Special People, Special Issues, after the news department folded, because I was doing 2-3 minute pieces for a news program at BronxNet called News 67. It was a half an hour news show. Special People, Special Issues came to be. And then I did that for 20 plus years. And then came to Vermont and did Abled and On Air. But originally in New York, I started doing internet radio under the name Abled and On Air. And then I decided I wanted to bring it back to television when I got here to Vermont.
So when you came to Vermont, did you think when you arrived here, as I'm going to look for cable access, there must be something in this town?
Yes.
You were aware
there's
of it?
There's plenty. Because my wife and I originally, we had gotten help from Good Samaritan.
Okay.
To try to find, Good Samaritan in Vermont. And we got some help finding an apartment. We originally lived in Barrie. Barrie had a public access station, and we started doing it there, and then we started doing it here. Mm-hmm. And Montpelier, we moved from Barrie to Montpelier. Montpelier is much better because everything is very close. The library, who doesn't want to live across the street?
Perfect.
From doctors, from the supermarkets, right down the block. If we want to go to Walmart, we hop a bus, So when we do research, I do a lot of research for our shows, but when a person wants to move somewhere, you just don't up and move. You find what is around, how do you get to A, B, C. You have to do research, and once you do your research, you have to double check things before you jump into it, because you got to make sure, as they say, your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed.
That's right. Yeah. That makes sense, and it's particularly important in a rural state where people come to Vermont. They know that it is I think the most beautiful state in the country, as beautiful scenery, and you think,
yeah, we do too. Who doesn't want to live near mountains?
Exactly. And then you go out to those mountains, and then you say, well, gee, I feel really isolated from the community. I wonder if the agency can help me get more connected. Mm. And if you haven't done your research, that can be quite a heavy lift. But
I also, back in late 2015, well, actually, in the summer of 2015, I had left New York originally to pursue a career in culinary. I have a culinary background. And I had gotten accepted to Culinary Institute of America. I had gotten lost in the shuffle being a student there. Mm-hmm. So then, because my wife wasn't a student there, we had issues. Culinary Institute of America is located in Poughkeepsie, New York. And we had, our housing was kind of screwed up, quote unquote, because if my wife wasn't a student, we had to live off campus. Dutchess County in Poughkeepsie floods a lot. So we had a flood in our apartment across from campus. The campus couldn't help, the school couldn't help us because my wife wasn't a student. So we became displaced and lost everything. Right, mm-hmm. And family was around, but we kind of wanted to do things ourselves. Mm-hmm. So we have some friends here in Vermont. We called them. Where can we go to get some assistance? We came here, got some assistance. The rest is history. Being displaced, especially if I wouldn't call it homeless, because there's a difference between chronic homeless and displacement. But if you just need a little help, mm-hmm. agencies are there to help you.
And how was your experience? You come here and you went to an organization. What was that experience like?
It was a little scary.
Okay.
Per se. But, you think of homeless shelters as scary places, but Good Samaritan opened up their home to us, quote unquote. We were the type of people, my wife and I were the type of people we're get up and go people. So we were, you can ask Good Sam, we were success stories. We got up in the morning, we got up at 6 a.m. That's when we were told to leave. You can't stay there past a certain time because they had rules. And we were going to appointments. My wife was going to Voc Rehab. She was getting some assistance there. I had gotten a part-time job working for Price Chopper and also Simply Subs. So I was employed.
So you got right into getting some supports right away and getting connected.
Yeah. When you have a place to go, mm-hmm. or even like if you create your own niche mm-hmm. and have a place to or things to do, mm-hmm. you keep your mind positively occupied.
Okay, that seems key.
Yeah, it's very important. I was born with cerebral palsy, but it doesn't have me.
I see.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's like people with autism. I've worked with students with autism. Autism is very ritualistic. If you have a schedule, in terms of ritual, from the time 8 a.m. you get up, have breakfast, take a shower, go here, et cetera, then, a schedule is key. Mm-hmm. Sometimes schedules can go off. Like Sundays, mm-hmm. there's no buses. Mm-hmm. So I take a walk on a weekend, mm-hmm. And you have time to relax. But I, myself, being a journalist for years, it's not a 9-to-5 job.
Yeah.
It isn't. And I like it that way.
I see. One of the things that we talk about in person-centered thinking practice is the importance of routines and rituals. Mm-hmm. And so as you're speaking, I'm thinking about that, how routines and rituals bring us a sense of comfort, a sense of
Vermont has brought us a sense of comfort.
How so?
Being here, knowing that if you get, well, I've never been in trouble with the law. Mm-hmm. I don't plan to be, but if you get into a rut or you get into a problem that you can't handle, you can always make a phone call and say, how can we work this out? Uh-huh. You know,
That's
to make to make life easier. New York, I was there for many years. I've worked with many organizations, mentoring and teaching students. You know, that was fine, but it got too stressful, per se. Like, I don't have too much hair, but it was pulling out my hair to the point I said, I need an easier life. I need a place where I can go out for a brisk walk and not have to look over my shoulder like who's following me or, you know.
So you found that, was Vermont a simpler kind of predictable lifestyle?
Vermont, how can I, between Vermont and New York, it's, I'll put it in this example. When I was a student at Kona Institute of America, right? You know what a buffet is?
I do.
Right? Mm-hmm. If you have a haphazard buffet that's not clean, or the plate is too full, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like when you go to a buffet, you put the food on a plate, okay? And it's all haphazard. Mm-hmm. But when you come to Vermont, you get a nice plate of food, everything, you know, and you have your choice whether or not you want seconds or not, or what you want seconds of. Everything in New York is like haphazard. You know, it's too stressful for a person. For a person with a special need, well, I view myself as an able person. I don't consider myself disabled, and that's one thing I want to talk to you on this podcast about. Is that
I'm interested in that.
There's something called ableism, right?
Yes.
I consider myself able. The state of Vermont and New York, they didn't get Vermont. New York didn't give us a lot of services, because we didn't qualify for a lot of stuff.
Okay.
We're high functioning individuals. Vermont, same thing. But there are people in this life, in this state of ours of Vermont, that, and also the world, that turn around and like, I'm disabled. It bothers me. It bothers my heart in thinking that, you know, I'm disabled. I can't do anything. But you can do lots of things. If you put yourself in a positive, in line with positive people. Yeah. Because negativity is not a good thing. Disabled. When I teach students, dis means not, able means to do. When you put that together, disabled, you can't do anything. But abled, you're able to do.
It sounds like that has been a theme as a key for you.
Yes.
And your wife, as you were saying, getting out there, being disciplined in terms of how you structure your day, and keeping moving forward.
There are times I need rest too.
Yeah.
Who doesn't?
Sure.
Who doesn't want to take a vacation?
Sure.
But
yeah, you bet.
Yeah.
So one of the things that it's interesting that you raised the question about, you know, terminology. And in our previous conversation, you were also talking about stigma, or people thinking negatively about people with disabilities. One of the things that I have learned for myself is no matter who you're talking about, if you're talking about somebody who may be identified as part of a larger group, you ask them how they want to be responded to. What do they want to be called? What is your preferred pronoun?
Why can't
what
you
is
just
your
call us people? We don't necessarily have to be called special needs because that I'm gonna describe it. I'm big into movies and television shows, especially old TV programs. There's a gentleman by the name of Burgess Meredith from remember the old series Batman?
Yes,
okay.
He was great.
Right?
He was a penguin?
Penguin.
Yeah.
Right? So he was being pigeonholed in a role, but penguin. And then in Rocky he played Mickey. So
that's right.
When you're pigeonholed into one thing, like example, there's a big thing now. Hollywood is really first getting to know people with special needs in roles. But like, for example, we have a new show now. It's in its third season. It was a wonderful show, The Good Doctor.
Yes.
Freddie Highmore, okay? He's playing a person with autism.
What do you think of that show?
It's showing the right and how a person with autism acts. Certain mannerisms, relationships, breakups, work-related things. Mm-hmm. People with special needs go through those things. But why can't a person with autism play an autistic person?
Right.
Why do you need? Freddie Highmore is a great actor, and they're bringing people with autism or people with disabilities on that show. But why can't you have a person with special needs playing that role?
Well, that's an interesting question, and I've thought about that myself. With regard to this idea of labeling or naming, one of the things
labels are for medication.
That's right, jars, not people, right? However, I have also met people and involved in some discussions with folks who think about the pride of being part of a group and owning a label, So there are people who experience autism who don't want you to describe it that way. They want to say, I'm an autistic, I'm proud, you get to call me that. It's part of my identity. And if it was taken away, I wouldn't be me anymore. So you don't get to call me the name, I own the name. And
but you understand what I'm saying, where
absolutely
being labels, in my opinion,
it doesn't work for some people.
It doesn't work for some people. Because when you go to a job interview, like for example, if I get a chance to work with your agency, you're not going to hire me because I have CP. Mm-hmm. You're not going to hire me because I have a visual impairment. Mm-hmm. You're going to hire me because of what I can bring to the table.
The gifts and contributions.
Yeah. I don't consider... I don't go to a restaurant and say, because I tried being a waiter. It doesn't work for me. I like being in the kitchen, but it doesn't. Certain positions for me don't work because of the way things are.
Yes.
But you don't go to a restaurant and the waiter, and the waiter or waitress says, what is he having? Why don't you ask him?
Right. This is a human being.
Having. And there's ways to communicate.
Mm-hmm.
The problem of society today is that we automatically assume because the person is visually impaired. Now, at night, if I don't know my surroundings, I use a blind gate. Yeah. Or if it's too dark, I use, in Vermont, someone gave me some wonderful advice in our building. Mm-hmm. Get one of those reflective vests to help you walk around so you're not, you don't get hit by a car, right?
Some adaptation that helps.
Exactly. So, don't assume just because I have peripheral vision or I have a little bit of a problem hearing you that I hate using the word stupid. Ask me what I want when I walk into that restaurant.
Sure. what I like to think about, and what we
I know we're jumping around to a lot of things.
No, I love this. I'm very curious about your perspective on this. I think about, the way I interpret what you're communicating there is presumed competence. Is that it's always better, it's the least dangerous assumption to go into a situation and say, assume that this, despite what you may be seeing and what you might be bringing into the situation in terms of expectation, assume this person can hear, can talk, can communicate. I just haven't figured it out yet. I'm the one that has to figure that out.
Example, when I walk into a kitchen, like when I was I only was able to do the summer session at Culinary Institute of America. But when I got to know people there, I changed my knife kit around, okay? I adapted my knife kit to larger handles. I was able to take a recipe and put it in larger print for myself.
You did that on your own?
Well, they have an office for students with special needs, but certain things I did on my own, so I can adapt.
Yep.
A person with a special need or person, if adaptation helps that person, by all means.
Yes. And we should be thinking about, that's when the idea of universal design comes in.
Yeah.
In our earlier conversation, you were talking about the Americans with Disabilities Act. I remember when that first came in, and there was an ominous sense of this is going to be a new burden on businesses and the community and so on. But it was because of those kind of mandates around universal design and access that we now have, sidewalks that have curb cuts. We have ramps where everyone can get
change.
People can vote and get involved and be part of their community because there's an idea of all means all, and we need to make it accessible.
One main thing I'm going to mention, our national anthem, is horrible. I'm going to say why. And it's that land of the free, home of the brave. We're not free because if we were free, we wouldn't be on food stamps, we wouldn't be on Medicaid, we wouldn't have struggles. Frederick Douglass once said, without struggle, there's no progress. But how much struggling do we need to do? Why can't a person with a special need have a stress-free life? That's what needs to happen next. Okay, I might not become president, but I'm me. I want to be treated as me, not as a person with a disability, if you will. Recently, an organization turned my wife and I down for not being chosen to be on a disability committee because they were looking to fill a quota because we view ourselves as professional people with challenges.
Okay.
Not necessarily, but we have a challenge.
Yeah.
Why can't we bring something to the table? It's fine. We're not going to be chosen for everything. God is in my walk of life. Whatever God needs to have happen, it will happen. And if it doesn't happen, then so be that.
You go through the next door, the next opportunity.
There was Steve Winwood. I'm in the high life again. Says that one door will close, another one will open.
I like that song.
Yeah,
it's a good philosophy too.
It's a not every single door need to open. Another one, what's that show? Hell's Kitchen.
Yes. That's
another philosophy.
Competition kind of show.
Yeah. Gordon Ramsay, open your door. And whatever, at the end, if your door opens, you become the executive chef of my restaurant.
Yeah.
And the other guy did an excellent job, or the other person did an excellent job. Why can't you offer another position to someone? You know what I mean?
Yeah, that would be a great outcome.
Yeah, one of the things that I did, and I'm gonna do here again, did it in New York. I worked with a lot of organizations: Lighthouse International, City University of New York, the John F. Kennedy Jr. Institute of Worker Education. Those students from those organizations came to me, and I trained them as crew on my television program. And one of my students said to me, I really love doing this. Who doesn't like a television studio? It's work. Mm-hmm. They might not necessarily get a job at it, but it's a skill. Holding a camera, taking a picture, using a dark room. I've done that. Editing a photograph. Those are skills that you can take and put on a resume. Don't know where it's going to get you, mm-hmm. but it can get you somewhere.
So you've created a lot of opportunities. You talked about, we were just talking about doors. You've opened a lot of doors for people in the process.
People with some of my former students, they're in colleges. There's another misconception. People with special needs can't go to college. They're opening doors now for a lot of...
college steps.
Yeah, college now. New York has something called College Now. You don't necessarily have to take a full load.
So you've had people go to college after meeting you?
College, or they've opened up their own businesses in photography.
It's exciting.
That type of thing. I freelance and I also freelance here in Vermont. I find that freelancing is better for me because I had jobs 40 hours a week. I've worked I did a job at Memorial Sloan Kettering as a janitor to make extra money. Working 40 hours a week is not easy for people. It really isn't.
It's not for everybody.
My clock was off in terms of my eating clock, my sleeping clock. I worked nights. I'd rather work nights in a newsroom, freelancing, than because it was hard. Mm-hmm. It was hard. So if I do, like in my former show that I did at BronxNet in New York and some other places, 2-3 shows in a sitting, 2 hours, I'm done. Mm-hmm. And then I can go home and sleep.
Mm. That flexibility works.
40 hours isn't for everybody.
Yeah, it really isn't. For sure.
It's just not. So it's a good thing to have an easy clock.
And do you find that working in media is uniquely suited to that?
Yeah.
And useful for other folks who may need that kind of flexibility as well?
I recommend it. I've interviewed painters and sculptors and other people. The arts has changed over the years. I'm gonna use this example, even though I've never met him. Mr. Rogers, back in 1969, went to the Senate and he petitioned the Corporation for Public Broadcasting to get more funding, and it worked. Here's a man who was a minister, pastor, that had a passion to teach children, okay? To be themselves. I like you just the way you are. That was his form of psychology, and he fought to have these types of broadcasting go on forever. And it went on forever in other mediums, Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood, and other mediums.
Do you feel an affinity with him? A connection to
people, even though I've never met him. Matter of fact, in 2020, this year, I've done small projects at PBS. Some of them have gotten off the ground. Some of them, they didn't really get off the ground. But this year, before the holiday, I managed to write an email to WQED, the same place where Mr. Rogers did his program. And hopefully I get sponsorship to rent one of their studios to go in and do similar talk show to bring it to PBS. And look, if it doesn't work, I go back to the drawing board.
Yeah, try something different.
But in this life, being a journalist, you have to take risks and educate people to the full extent. Different thing. I would watch Sesame Street and how they did things. I don't know if you ever got a chance to see some archives, but when I was in New York, I interviewed Lou Ferrigno from Incredible Hulk at New York City Comic Con.
What was that like?
Only was allowed 6 minutes because he was signing autographs. But he said in his interview, he does things despite his challenges.
He has a hearing impairment.
Hearing impairment, 85% deaf. Yeah. Telling stories are extremely important.
Yeah.
Extremely important.
And you're able to do that with Abled and on air?
Yeah.
Any of that coming up in 2020, this new year?
Yeah. I plan to do some documentaries and make it longer. We're given an hour time slot, but I want to make that go further. I look at it this way. Don't break the wheel or break the car. Make it go farther or change the transmission.
Okay, so that's your philosophy and approach to this great
yeah.
book.
I look at this as my my Model T. Able and on air. A small place is sometimes better, or smaller projects is sometimes better because you can make them larger. It's just a wonderful thing.
It is a wonderful thing. Well, good luck with Abled and on the air. It's a great program.
I just want to say our website, for those that want to find out about Abled and on air, you can go to www.ORCA Media, ORCA Media.net, and you can look at us on YouTube. And for those that want to contact me, my email address is abledtv, that's ABLED TV 980@gmail.com.
Very good. Well,
thank
good
you.
luck. And thank you very much. It was great to see you.
Thank you very much for letting me be part of the Lovely podcast.
It's been a pleasure talking.
Well, that's our show for today. Thanks so much for joining us. And thank you, Lawrence. That was such a great conversation, and it's great to meet you and be part of your program. Find out more about the Lovely podcast, including the page specifically dedicated to this episode, and our guest day with some extra credit information about the various topics that we covered. I think you'll really like it. Also, Lovely is sponsored by listeners like you. Pitch in to keep this podcast going strong, highlighting people who are supporting whole communities. Find us at patreon.com/delovely. Some levels of support can get you regular guest features or some digital media support to your nonprofit. Take a look today, and thank you.